Hello, welcome to my channel. My name is XP Lovecat, and I recently finished watching part 3 of the Netflix original series, Chilling Adventures of Sabrina. And this last part not only ramped up the Lovecraft references, but it also heavily hinted that part 4 is going to be focused on more Lovecraftian themes. So I thought it would be fun to take a look back at the series so far and look at the Lovecraft references in it, and also talk a little bit about my predictions for part 4 and what it may contain for us. Chilling Adventures of Sabrina has tons of references from other horror movies, authors, the Archie comics, and other pop culture, but I'm going to be specifically focusing on Lovecraft. And warning, there definitely will be spoilers. So first I want to talk about a couple of overarching themes in the series that are very Lovecraft in nature. The first being the town of Greendale. So this town is very separated from any other surrounding towns. It is more of a old school type feel, a little creepy, overcast most of the time. And because of this, it feels very New England and like Lovecraft country. So I think that is a little bit of a hint and parallel to Lovecraft's setting that we often see in his short stories. Now, the second thing is the Church of Night. So this reminds me of the short story written in 1935 called The Haunter of the Dark, where there is the Church of Starry Wisdom in it. And this church is very occult and somewhat evil. And so there's just a bit of a parallel between those two names. Now, the third thing which we see throughout the series is psychopumps. Now, psychopumps are not necessarily a new idea. It's often said in religions that these are representative of things that will help pass to the afterlife. So a spirit that has recently deceased is helped along to the afterlife with these creatures. And in Dunwich Horror, it's actually mentioned that these are birds or whippoorwills. And in Sabrina, this is also where we see whippoorwills that show up when the witches are astral projecting, which would just be the spirit traveling between planes, which Hilda clearly says is not a good idea. And the more of these birds that show up, the greater the chance that they're going to take you to the afterlife, which the witches don't necessarily belong if they're still living. One specific episode I want to call out in part 1 is episode 5, which is Dreams in a Witch House. And this title directly parallels the short story written in 1932 by Lovecraft, which is Dreams in the Witch House. In this story, Gilman occupies a potentially cursed attic, and this attic has similarities to Ambrose's room in Sabrina. In addition, the witch in the Lovecraft story, Kezia Mason, has a lot of similarities to Batty Bat in the Sabrina show. Both of them haunt through dreams. Specifically in the story, Kezia Mason, she has Gilman dream about signing this book of Azathoth. And I think that's really interesting because Sabrina is actually going through that struggle in part 1 of deciding whether she's going to sign the Book of the Beast or not. Overall, the Sabrina episode, I think, plays a lot into Lovecraft's story. Moving on to part 2, in episode 3, there is just a little name drop going on. So Nick, he actually banishes a familiar, and he says he banishes it to the Mountains of Madness. I think there's also another name drop somewhere in the series, but I couldn't remember what episode. But there is a brother Lovecraft that works for the Church of Night. Now, another episode that has a lot of Lovecraft in it is episode 4 of part 2. And Harvey has this vision of time at an art school. And his roommate in this art school, his name is Howard, just like H.P. Lovecraft's first name is Howard. And this art student seems very disturbed. He can't really sleep, and he does art during night specifically. And his paintings are very deranged and creepy looking, pulling a lot from the influence of Lovecraft. This episode is very interesting to me. I think that the art student is kind of a mix of Richard Pickman from Pickman's Model, but also a little bit of Eric Zahn, which is from the music of Eric Zahn. Both are just artistic, little crazy types. Probably more so Pickman just because it is directly painting and they paint creepy things. Now, in this episode, we also learn that the influences are coming from a portal in the closet. And when Harvey opens the closet, it is very cosmic horror. We don't get to see what's in there, but it is creepy. Part 3 of Sabrina has some more obvious hints to Lovecraft. Starting particularly in episode 2, we find out that Father Blackwood has actually been trying to work with the Eldritch Terrors, it's what he calls them. And we find him in Scotland. He's doing some sort of ritual which would require a couple of sacrifices, which are his twins. Not a good situation. And we actually see a deep one rise out of the water and bring him this weird egg thing. First of all, I just want to say I loved the deep one that came out. I thought they did a really good job with costuming and it was enjoyable for sure. Blackwood has summoned this deep one and he proclaims that the Eldritch Terrors are coming. Now jump to episode 3. There's another Lovecraft name drop and this is Professor Carcosa. There's a carnival in town and the name of the carnival is Professor Carcosa's Carnival. Finally, in the last episode of the season, we find out that Father Blackwood is actually able to finish his ritual and what he had been working towards because there's great flashes of light and this egg is broken open and we find that the Eldritch Terrors have been summoned. So that left a pretty big cliffhanger and me very excited for part 4. I did a little bit of research to see if I could find what part 4 was all about. I did find an article that interviews someone on the team and he gave a little bit of hints as to what to expect in part 4. So I'm going to read a couple quotes from that article, but I'll also link it in the description below if you're interested in reading the whole thing. One of the writers say, "One of my favorite horror writers is H.P. Lovecraft. And there's a definite H.P. Lovecraft vibe in part 4. We're taking very, very old primal ideas of horror and fear and unleashing them on Sabrina, on the Spellmans, and on Greendale. And Greendale becomes a battleground for this really epic battle between evil and good and horror and insanity. And it's huge. It's big." Ooh, I love that. I'm really excited. Another quote from the article is, "At the end of the season, Father Blackwood says he's unleashed the Eldritch Terrors, and those are kind of our threats in part 4. So each episode has a big bad that represents this primal terror, this primal fear. So we see Blackwood ascend a little bit more again to the level he was around season 1 as a threat because of what he's unleashed." Ultimately, it sounds like there's going to be a lot more Lovecraft in part 4, and particularly they're going to highlight a different being or creature in each of those episodes. Well, I'd love them to take a stab at Nyarlathotep or Dreamlands or a bigger concept like that. I feel like it might be too much to take on if they're trying to bounce around from episode to episode. So hopefully they don't choose something like that and just rush through it. I do hope they spend a bit of time on some of the cooler creations like Migos, Hounds of Tyndallis, or maybe bring back the deep ones. Dagon might make an appearance. And I am predicting that they will probably have Cthulhu maybe at the very end of the episodes, just because this is the most popular and well-known of Lovecraft's creations. So I'm sure they're going to want to just sprinkle that in. What are your guys' predictions for part 4? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear them. I'm pretty excited, so hopefully when it comes out, it does not disappoint. If you want to catch that review right when it comes out, make sure to subscribe and hit that bell notification. Thank you. Bye.